All right, everybody. Welcome. It's great to see you all. How's it going?
Good night. I'm glad it all worked out.
Good, Susie. Okay.
It is great to see you. Let's see who we have here. Tom, welcome. Adina Malka, welcome. Joy, welcome. Stan, welcome. Susan, welcome. Bill, welcome. Howard, welcome. It's good to see you on a Tuesday. Tony, welcome. Lisa, welcome. Mom, welcome. Ezra, welcome. Jerry, welcome. Rose, welcome. Anat, welcome. Lana, welcome. David, welcome. Roy, welcome. Fran and Drawer, welcome. Oh, it's fabulous to see you all. Okay, hope everybody is ready to roll. I will tell you something. Can you imagine? It was just a week ago, Tuesday night, World Series, Game 6, Braves won. Can you imagine? It's just a week. Everything changes, and nothing really changes. It's.
And did you see the game yesterday? The Steelers won.
I didn't see that, but I am. It's certainly always a good thing when the Steelers win. That's always a good thing.
In the last 3 seconds, literally.
Nice. Okay. So let's jump into today's class. I'm going to mute everybody. So we have a nice clean background. You can unmute at any point in time if you want to jump in on the class, question, comment, etc. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Outsmarting Antisemitism. This is our third session, 3 out of 4. And boy, do we have a compelling conversation tonight. First, I want to open with birthday wishes to my mom. Happy birthday. Lots of blessings, lots of good wishes, and lots of good stuff. It's a special day, so happy birthday. All right, as always, I want to extend a very special thank you to our course sponsors. So for this course, the sponsorship for this course, we have Dr. Joy Maxey, Dr. Alex and Laura Doman, and Howard Feinstein. Thank you so much for your sponsorship for the course. It is greatly appreciated. Okay, on to today's lesson. They tell a story about terrorists who have taken 3 captives. There are 3 captives that are being held by the terrorists, and the terrorists give each of these captives one final wish. One of the captives is a CNN reporter from the US, and the reporter says, I'm an American. As my final wish, I'd like a burger and fries, traditional American fare. And the terrorists grant him his wish. Well, the second captive is a BBC reporter. And the BBC reporter, being true to journalism, says, I would like permission to record everything that happens on my recorder, record the audio of everything that happens until the final moments. As a journalist, this is what I'd like to do, and the terrorists grant that request. The final captive is an Israeli soldier, an Israeli commando. And his final request, he says, the Israeli says to the terrorists, he says, I want you to come over to me and kick me really hard. Okay? So the terrorists head over to him and give him a zetz, give him a kick, and he's in pain. He rolls on the floor. He's rolling around in agony. And as he's on the floor, he pulls out a small pistol from his sock, and he begins shooting the terrorists and neutralizing, let's just keep it family friendly, neutralizing the danger. And the terrorists are gone. And incredibly, the threat is gone, and they're all saved. He unties, the Israeli officer unties the CNN reporter, the BBC reporter, and they say to him, thank you very much, but let me ask you a question. If you had a pistol the whole time, why didn't you shoot them right away? So the Israeli says, what? And then you would report that I was the aggressor? Okay. All right. I'm assuming that y'all got it, and that's okay. Good. All right. So you had to kick him to, okay. I don't want to spell it out. So today we're going to address a very important topic, and that is Israel directed anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism that takes the form of, that targets Israel. Now, if you pay attention to any amount of international news, chances are that before long, you're going to encounter something about Israel. And more often than not, it seems, the reports out of Israel are a bit ugly and a bit vilifying. In fact, if you go by the news, you might think that Israel is the worst country in the world sometimes. The most horrible violators of human rights, an apartheid state, occupiers, terrorists, deserving of boycotts, divestment, and sanctions, aka BDS. All too often, this is the image of Israel as portrayed in our society, and it's not just the media. The United Nations has called out and condemned Israel more than any other nation, any other country on the planet. And not only is Israel criticized and condemned, but its very legitimacy as a state, as a nation, is all too often called into question, put up for discussion. Can you imagine? The one Jewish state on earth happens to be the one that seems to be the most vilified on earth. So is this some wild coincidence? Is it some like random coincidence? Or is perhaps there's something, is there something a little bit more nefarious at play here? So in today's session, here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at all of this and much more and ask some very tough questions, including, is anti-Israel bias anti-Semitic? Does criticizing Israel necessarily make one an anti-Semite? Is there a line between a valid criticism of Israel and straight up Jewish directed hate? Why are there so many Jews that are joining anti-Israel causes? And finally, what can we do about all of this right now? These are the questions, these are the themes that we will be exploring in today's session. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to explore these questions, to explore these topics with you today. These are very important topics, and I'm excited about the prospect of perhaps coming up with some ideas and some conclusions together. So we have a lot to explore. Let's jump in and let's begin. Okay, so I want to begin with a brilliant observation. I would say a classic, at this point, it's a classic observation and brilliant from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. It's something that I've mentioned multiple times so far in this series. And I said that later on, I've said in previous classes, later on at some point we'll get to it. Well, now is where we get to it. So I meant, but I'll just tell you what it is. So I've mentioned before that Rabbi Jonathan Sacks compares or describes anti-Semitism as a virus. What's the significance of anti-Semitism being a virus? So a virus, when a virus hits a wall, it doesn't give up. It doesn't say, oh, I guess we're done here. No, a virus mutates. A virus hits a wall and it just changes its colors. It mutates and then keeps on going. So anti-Semitism, as Rabbi Sacks explains, is like a virus in that this pandemic, if you will, constantly mutates. And Rabbi Sacks describes the pandemic of anti-Semitism as having three waves. So let's do this inside. Let's read this inside. All right, I'm going to share my screen. At this point, you should all have books. If you don't have a book, you can message me after the class, send me an email or text message, or call me after the class and let me know. But let's jump into this conversation. We're going to jump in on in the book, or I'm going to put the page online as well. It's page 84 in your textbooks. Let's see if I can share this. Why is it not coming up? Here it is. Okay, great. A mutating virus. All right, let's ask Adina Malka, if you don't mind jumping in on this, from Rabbi Sacks, text number 1, where he describes the virus of anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism is not an ideology, a coherent set of beliefs. It is, in fact, an endless stream of contradictions. The best way of understanding it is to see it as a virus. Viruses attack the human body, but the body itself has an immensely sophisticated defense, the human immune system. How then do viruses survive and flourish? By mutating. Anti-Semitism mutates, and in doing so defeats the immune system set up by cultures to protect themselves against hatred. Most people at most times feel a residual guilt at hating the innocent. Therefore, anti-Semitism,
All right. Oops. Here we go.
therefore, anti-Semitism has always had to fight legitimation in the most prestigious source of authority at any given time. In the first centuries of the Common Era, and again in the Middle Ages, this was religion. This is why Judophobia took the form of religious doctrine. In the 19th century, religion had lost prestige, and the supreme authority was now science. Racial anti-Semitism was duly based on two pseudosciences: social Darwinism, the idea that in society as in nature, the strong survive by eliminating the weak, and the so-called scientific study of race. By the late 20th century, science had lost its prestige, having given us the power to destroy life on Earth. Today, the supreme source of legitimacy is human rights. That is why Jews, or the Jewish state, are accused of the 5 primal sins against human rights: racism, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, attempted genocide, and crimes against humanity.
All right, thank you for this. Thank you for reading this. This is Rabbi Sachs's thesis explaining how anti-Semitism is a virus. I want to turn to you, all of you. It's an open question, open mic. You can unmute yourself and jump in. What do you think about this thesis from Rabbi Sachs? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you want to comment on it? Jump in.
I think it's just a very timely way of explaining, anti-Semitism, like, we're in the virus and how it mutates and how anti-Semitism mutates throughout the centuries. And, I think it's perfect. It's a perfect way of understanding it.
Okay, good. Tom.
He wrote this in 2007. He lived till about a year ago, November 7th. I wonder if over time he would have modified it, particularly given the COVID experience.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Okay, good. What else? What else did you notice about this text? What do you like? What perhaps do you want to tweak in your own understanding? There's no right or wrong answer over here. It's just an open conversation. Okay. All right. If you have anyone has thoughts, jump in at any point in time, but let's continue. So just to explain what Rabbi Sachs is writing. So he says essentially, he kind of fits classic anti-Semitism into 3 waves of this virus. Wave number 1 is what we might call religious anti-Semitism. That's where hatred of Jews is predicated, or at least blamed on, Jews being on the wrong side of religion. Wave number 2 is racial anti-Semitism, where Jews are on the wrong side of race. And wave 3 of anti-Semitism, which he's saying is the current wave, again, he wrote this a few years ago, is human rights anti-Semitism. And of course, Jews, once again, are on the wrong side of human rights. So in each era, whether it's the era of religious anti-Semitism, racial anti-Semitism, or human rights anti-Semitism, Jews just happen to be on the wrong side of the issue, or the wrong religion. Just go ask the Christians and the Muslims. We're the wrong religion. We are the wrong race. Just ask the Germans. And today, we're on the wrong side of the human rights issue. Just ask those who slam Israel as being the very worst nation ever vis-a-vis human rights. This is the narrative that has anti-Semitism morphing throughout the ages and adopting, as Rabbi Sachs explains, adopting the most prestigious authority of the time as support for the anti-Semitic sentiment. What emerges then what emerges is that the full-on attack against Israel, painting it as the worst of the worst, an apartheid state, the genocidal state seeking to oppress innocent people, etc., is simply, again, according to this reading, is simply the same old anti-Semitism. It's the same old Jewish hatred with a shiny new veneer, but inside, same stuff. So that's Rabbi Sachs's perspective. That's his angle on it. Now, you might be thinking this. I know I'm thinking this, and I'll just share it. You might be thinking, wait, does that mean that all criticism of Israel is necessarily anti-Semitic? Does that mean that no one can legitimately criticize Israel or any of its policies or any of its politicians, perhaps? That doesn't seem fair. In other words, is Rabbi Sachs really submitting? Is he really suggesting, right, that any criticism of Israel, if you call out Israel saying, hey, I don't agree with this policy, this seems unfair to others, that necessarily means anti-Semitism? Is it an automatic, or is it perhaps a little bit more nuanced? So I think it would be reasonable to say that there might be valid criticisms of Israel, right? There might be a point where there's a valid criticism and another point where that criticism becomes an anti-Semitic attack. But if that's the case, where do you draw the line, and who really determines where that line gets drawn? So I'm glad that you asked, because I'd like to offer a few ideas about where to draw that line between valid criticism and anti-Semitism. So let's explore this topic, and more specifically, the distinction between the two offerings. And one way we could do this is by asking a question, kind of like an informal poll by raise of hand. And the informal poll, first question would be, do you support Israel? And I know when it comes to polls, always a certain amount of people will not raise their hand just because who can bother? But if we ask the question, who supports Israel? I would imagine most hands are meaning to go up. Okay, good. I see about, oh, look at that. Okay, it worked. Lots of hands going up. Okay. But if I asked you, second question, do you think that everything Israel has done, all the policies, all the leadership, that everything that's done has been perfect? Would you raise your hand? Or would you say maybe not? Okay, so good. Which tells us exactly. So you're supporting my theory, which is that we can reasonably suggest that one could be a supporter of Israel and a supporter of Jews, not an anti-Semite, and at the same time be somewhat critical of Israel. And again, the criticism, the specific criticism, could run the range of a policy, politics, the nature of politics, a politician in Israel, corruption, etc. I don't know if we have to get into the details, but it can run a pretty broad range of potential critiques against Israel. But then the question is, so then what's Rabbi Sachs saying? When does it become anti-Semitism? So again, the first thing I want to do is normalize the idea of the possibility of criticizing Israel. It's not like any criticism means, oh, Jewish hate. I think it's healthy for when I say us, I mean, it's healthy for Jews to take a step back from calling out everything as anti-Semitism. I don't think that does anybody any favors. Remember the story of the boy who cried wolf? Yeah, remember that one? Okay, so good. So let's ease off of the trigger for a moment on calling out anti-Semitism, even as it's important to do so. Let's understand that not everyone that says, hey, maybe Israel should consider tweaking that, and I don't think that doesn't necessarily mean Jew hater, Jew killer. That's not necessarily the synonyms. You can be a supporter of the Jewish state, a supporter of the Jewish people, and still feel that Israel is not perfect. That's absolutely legitimate. What's not legitimate, and so here let's talk about where that line is. What's not legitimate, I would suggest tonight, is when you have anti-Jewish hate dressed up as Israel criticism. That's what anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism in this context is when you're targeting Jews, but you're dressing it up under the guise of, oh, anti-Israel sentiment. But then, of course, how do you differentiate between legitimate criticism of Israel and straight up anti-Semitic hate? For this, I would like to suggest that we learn something together, that we learn an ancient Jewish text together. This text that we're about to learn, which if you have a book is text number 2. This comes from the Midrash. The Midrash dates back 17, 18, 1900 years, 2000 years. This dates back many years. And that's when it was written down. The teachings originate even further back. So let's study something together from the Midrash. The Midrash actually relates a story that took place at the times of the Roman Empire, when the Roman Empire crushed Judea, crushed the Jewish homeland. And this is after the destruction of the temple, even after the revolt, the revolt of Bar Kokhba that got crushed. So let me put it to you very simply. This is in the 100s, in the 2nd century, right? 100s of the Common Era. There was an emperor, a Roman emperor, whose name was Hadrian. This guy, Hadrian, started off, when he was first emperor, he started off as a friend to the Jews. In fact, the Talmud has many stories about Hadrian's affinity to the Jewish people. However, he quickly turned against the Jewish people. Why did he turn against the Jewish people? So most understand this as being a product of the aforementioned Bar Kokhba revolt, when the Jews, or a segment of the Jews, tried to overthrow Roman control, and Rome crushed the revolt. That's when Hadrian said, no more Mr. Nice Guy, it's all out war. And Hadrian comes down as one of the worst dictators, one of the worst oppressors of the Jews in history. His decrees were horrific and barbaric. He tortured and murdered many Jews, prominent Jews, Jewish leaders, including the great Rabbi Akiva and others. The account of the 10 martyrs, many of them are killed, are murdered by the hands of the wicked Hadrian. So my point is this. My point is that Hadrian lived again in the early 100s, and he, at the point of this conversation, is a rabid Jew hater. Let's read this text together. I'm going to read it inside, and I want to throw a little bit of commentary on this. Okay, this is going to be, let me skip some polls. We don't need that. We did our own poll. Text number 2, Midrash. So we begin with a name that we have no idea who this is. No comment. No one has any clue who this is. The guy's name is Imikantron. Again, we have no idea who this is. The commentaries struggle to try to decipher who the identity is, and the conclusion is we simply don't know. So Imikantron, it seems that he wasn't Jewish. It seems that he was of another faith because of what he writes, and you'll see why. Imikantron, this guy, who we don't know, wrote to Emperor Hadrian. He was the emperor of the Roman Empire at that time. If it is circumcision that you hate about the Jews, right? If it's circumcision that you dislike, Arabian tribes also circumcise. If it is Shabbat observance that you despise, the Kuthians similarly observe Shabbat. Clearly, then, you simply hate the Jewish people. Their God will exact punishment from you. This is the message that Imikantron writes to Emperor Hadrian. The response is unnecessary. Whatever he responded, whatever he did, it's not relevant. The point is the volley, if you will, the shot that Imikantron fires at Emperor Hadrian in this letter, right? What's he saying? You've banned the Jews from circumcising their children and observing Shabbat, amongst other things. You've banned these practices. If you really don't like circumcision, then why are the Arabian tribes fine doing it? If you don't like Shabbat observance, then why are the Kuthians fine doing it? In other words, these are also people within the empire, and you haven't come down on them. Clearly, concludes Imikantron, it's not the circumcision and it's not the Shabbat observance. It's hatred against the Jewish people. And he says you're going to get in trouble one day. He throws in this veiled threat. Okay, so what's the point? When do you know, or how do you know when when the issue is the issue, or when the issue is merely a smokescreen to another issue that's unspoken? One of the ways to decipher this or to decode this is, do you see a double standard? Is there a double standard? In other words, are you only targeting Jewish circumcision and Jewish Shabbat observance, then it's not about the circumcision and Shabbat observance. Then it's about the Jew. This reminds me of a powerful story that you might be aware of. In the 1920s, the president of Harvard University was a man by the name of A. Lawrence Lowell. That was his name, A. Lawrence Lowell. He was the president of Harvard. And he tried to limit the number of Jews in Harvard. Why? Because he said Jews cheat. Jews cheat. When a respected colleague pointed out to him that others also cheat, he famously responded, and I quote, "You're changing the subject. I'm talking about Jews." You with me on this? That's what he said. Yeah, Jews cheat, but everyone cheats. You're changing the subject. I'm talking about Jews. When you encounter a double standard, a blatant, cold-blooded double standard, right? It's not about cheating. It's about the Jew cheating. It's not about circumcision. It's the Jew circumcising. It's not about Shabbat. It's the Jew observing Shabbat. When that becomes clearly identified, when that double standard becomes apparent, then you know it's not what we would call a valid criticism or a valid issue. The issue is not the one that's being propped up. That's a puppet issue. That's fake news, as they say today, right? That's not true. What's the issue? The issue is the Jew. That's the issue. So Hadrian says, no circumcision, no Shabbat. Hold on. What about these guys? Don't change the subject. We're talking about Jews. Okay, so the issue is the Jews, right? President of Harvard says Jews cheat. Let's limit the number of Jews. But others also cheat. There's no evidence that Jews cheat more percentage-wise. Don't change the subject. We're talking about Jews. When that happens, when you encounter a blatant double standard, it's reasonable. I'm going to say this carefully. It's reasonable to suggest that the issue is not the issue that's being alleged, but the issue is the Jew. The issue is essentially targeting the Jew, which we would call Jew hatred or anti-Semitism, whatever you want to call it. That's the issue. So this is the first indication. This what we call a double standard is the first indication that the issue at hand is not the one that's on the table, but it's something else. And that, again, is what we might reasonably call anti-Semitism. So can there be legitimate criticism? Sure, absolutely. Well, moving it back to Israel, can there be legitimate criticism of Israel? Sure. But if the criticism maintains a double standard, in other words, if the other is not criticized, but only the Jewish state, then we begin to ask the question, one second, time out, one second. Is that the issue? Or is the issue that it's a Jewish state? Like, just be honest here. Is that the issue? Because if that's the issue, why aren't we talking about it elsewhere? And again, this is not saying, just to be very clear here, this idea of a double standard indicating something a little bit deeper beneath the surface is not suggesting, it's not a game of whataboutism. It's like, what about those guys? It's not about shifting. It's not about shifting and trying to squirm out of something. That's not what this is about. This is about trying to determine, to the best of one's ability, is the issue, or is there something else going on here? Because if this issue is the issue, as Imikantron says to Hadrian, so what about the Arabian nations? What about the Kuthians? We would ask the head of Harvard, what about others that cheat? It's not about saying, it's not so bad because everyone's doing it. That's not the point. The point is simply saying, if you're only going after the Jewish version of this, then maybe it's not about the thing. Maybe it's about the Jew. Okay, Adina Malka, I see that you unmuted.
Yeah, that's the problem at the UN, is that there's so many, like I think 80% of the resolutions are passed in the UN are against Israel.
Right.
And it might be legitimate criticism, but why aren't we talking about Sudan? Why aren't we talking about Ethiopia? Why aren't we talking about Ukraine? It's a double standard.
And I think, right, and very good points, and this is exactly where we're headed. And we have to be careful and nuanced even in this conversation. because what you're saying is where I'm going with this. We have to be careful and say, it's not that we're saying that Israel should be lumped into the company of, of dictatorships and communist countries. It's not saying that's not where Israel wants to be, but really it is like this. Really, the point is when the criticism is so pointed in one direction, it just belies the fact. It just reveals it says something about the finger pointer. It says something about the finger pointer. Why you only, what's with the double standard here, right? What's with the double standard? Again, that's not excusing what anything that needs to be righted. If something needs to be righted, a valid criticism, 100%. But the question is, where's it coming from? We're trying to draw that line. So what we're going to do now is, again, this is what we just read is an ancient Midrash that goes back a story 1900 years. 1900 years. So this is good in Jewish literature. If you want to know what does Judaism say about it, this is some ancient Jewish wisdom on the notion of double standards and how that reveals anti-Jewish biases. Good, perfect. Now let's turn to a more modern text, a more modern source, and that is famed Soviet refusenik Natan Sharansky. So let's take a look at what Sharansky writes. He formulates what he calls the 3 Ds of anti-Israel anti-Semitism. The 3 Ds. Let's take a look at this. This is going to be text number 3. Let me pull this up on the screen. Give me a moment here, and we're going to review this together. The 3D test. Okay, let us ask Dr. Maxey. Please read this one, text number 3.
I believe that we can apply a simple test. I call it the 3D test to help us distinguish legitimate criticism of Israel from anti-Semitism. The first D is the test of demonization. When the Jewish state is being demonized, when Israel's actions are blown out of all sensible proportion, when comparisons are made between Israelis and Nazis and between Palestinian refugee camps and Auschwitz, this is anti-Semitism, not legitimate criticism of Israel. The second D is the test of double standards. When criticism of Israel is applied selectively, when Israel is singled out by the United Nations for human rights abuses, while the behavior of known and major abusers such as China, Iran, Cuba, and Syria is ignored, when Israel's Magen David Adom, alone among the world's ambulance services, is denied admission to the International Red Cross, this is anti-Semitism. The third D is the test of delegitimization. When Israel's fundamental right to exist is denied, alone among all peoples in the world, this too is anti-Semitism.
Thank you. This is very powerful and very important. The 3 Ds of anti-Semitism, Sharansky's test. He developed this test. I mean, it's not, he formulates this, he articulates it, and it's been adopted. It's been adopted by many groups, officially, unofficially, as a kind of an indicator of what anti-Semitism, where that line is between valid criticism and anti-Semitism. So when there's demonization, Israel's apartheid, Nazi-like, the Holocaust, genocide, right? When it becomes blown out of all sensible proportions, then there's something else going on here. Double standards. This is the one that we got from the Midrash, the one that we from ancient Jewish text, is when Israel is singled out and criticized exclusively or selectively, and others are not mentioned. Then again, it might be a valid issue, but there seems to be an anti-Semitic, some sort of angle, some sort of bias that is driving it. And of course, the delegitimization, which is when Israel's right to exist is called into question alone amongst all nations of the world, the only nation where people even ask the question, should it exist? I don't remember anyone asking any other nation, should it exist, right? When when the question is asked about Israel, let's put it this way, it's a red flag. Any of these 3, these alone is a red flag. When all 3 are present simultaneously in a criticism of Israel, when you can detect this idea of demonization and double standarding and delegitimization in a criticism of Israel, that's a pretty good indication that this is not simply good faith criticism. It's not coming from a warm, fuzzy, and loving place. It's not coming from a place that is honorable and respectful to Jews and the Jewish state. No. There's something far more insidious here, which is why it's taking the form of demonization and double standards and delegitimization. So what we've seen, and hopefully this is making sense, what we've seen is that, yes, one can indeed love and respect Jews and criticize Israel at the same time. It's not a contradiction. There can be a healthy form of criticism and critique. And in fact, I would argue that critique is good, healthy critique is beneficial. I mean, think about it on a personal level, right? Don't we want to be corrected? Don't we want to know when we can improve something and tweak it for the better? Of course. There's nothing wrong with legitimate criticism and critique of Israel. That's not anti-Semitic. But when the conversation steers into the territory of demonizing language, applying double standards, and delegitimizing the right of Israel to exist altogether, that's when all the red flags come out. That's when we have a problem. So hopefully this is explaining a little bit more the question that I asked. How do you know where and when to draw the line? Hopefully this has given us some practical language and tools to try to ascertain whether or not this is legitimate criticism or bordering or crossing the line into Jewish hate, anti-Semitic criticism, which brings us back to Rabbi Sachs. Rabbi Sachs is writing beautifully. His way of writing, his way of communication is absolutely articulate. He writes the first text that we had, anti-Semitism is a virus. And in every age, it seeks to legitimize itself by utilizing the language, the edifices that are held in the highest standard. So when religion is the ultimate, so then that's the problem with the Jews. When race is the ultimate, that's the problem with the Jews. When human rights is the ultimate, that's the problem with the Jews. So how do you know if it's a valid criticism or not? Okay, if the issue is the issue, then it might be a valid criticism. But when it's targeting Jews in a way that crosses over with the 3Ds that we described, then we know it's just using human rights as a shield, as an excuse to target Jews. And once again, it is anti-Semitic in nature. All right, does that make sense? Let's do questions and comments thus far. Yeah, jump in. Adina Malko.
It just reminds me, of the Haggadah. It says in every generation, a pharaoh will rise up against him.
Right. Yeah. Right. And it might look like a different pharaoh. It might justify itself, say, I'm not a pharaoh. I believe in human rights. I'm not a pharaoh. I'm championing human rights. Okay. But is it really about the human rights? Or because if it's about human rights, then let's have a broader conversation about that. Why are we targeting? Right? Why are we demonizing and targeting with a double standard and delegitimizing if it's about human rights? Why are we going past those lines? Yeah.
It's not about the Jews, it's about Pharaoh.
I'm with you. Right. It's about the Pharaoh being Pharaoh. Good. All right. Questions, comments. More questions, comments on this thus far.
I just want to point out that your sister Rena brings this up to me all the time. And she says, why isn't the UN speaking out against the partition of India? And millions of people were sent across borders. Some were sent to Pakistan, some were sent back to, and it was horrific. Right. And to this day, they're still killing each other about this giant border dispute. And nobody condemns anybody over there. Right. Yeah. No human. She brings it up all the time. Your sister.
Yeah. The double standard is a big deal. That's why, that's the one that we supported, not just from Sharansky, but from the Midrash. That double standard thing is a big deal, and it's very indicative. Now, you could say, oh, I'll tell you why Israel's held to a double standard, because Israel claims that it's democratic, and it's still doing these things. So that's what we're holding to, because you hold yourself to a higher standard. So we're holding you to a higher standard. I hear that. I'm giving an out almost to the double standard. I know exactly what I'm doing, but it's something that I think about often. Maybe that's why Israel is targeted. But at the same time, there's something else that's driving it. When it goes past those lines, it's being driven by something else. It oftentimes, not always, but there are instances, and too many of them, that don't simply feel like good faith critiques, good faith. Let's tweak this, let's improve this. How can we work together on this? But straight up, the Jews, let's target Jews. And again, we don't want to cry wolf. We don't want to cry anti-Semitism with every word that's critical of Israel. But at the same time, we have to keep our eyes open. We have to call a spade a spade. The double standard thing is a big deal in your textbooks. I don't want to look, the graphs and the polls and the additional materials, that's all stuff that you can look at on your own. I don't feel like I need to walk you through that, but I do want to point out one thing. It's in the back of your textbooks. You'll find it somewhere. It's in the back of the lesson somewhere. You'll find it. There is a conversation there about occupied territories. Yeah. The big buzzword is that Israel, the big line that everyone says is that Israel is in violation of international law, with the occupied territories, occupied land. Okay. By the way, you should know there's another side of that narrative that never gets told. There's another side of that narrative that never gets told, right? Kenny, welcome. It's great to have you here. We got to acknowledge Kenny's with us. Kenny from the hospital. This is amazing. Kenny, I want to wish you, on behalf of all of us, a refuah shlema, a full and speedy recovery. We can't wait to see you back in full health. It should be very, very soon. All right. Kenny, we love you and sending blessings and good wishes. Okay, so that's, first of all, that's very important. Now back to this thing. So it's almost become accepted because it's been repeated so often that Israel for sure is in violation of international law, right? For sure. It's not even a question. But did you know, I just like to offer this. Did you know that Israel has another position on this? Israel says occupied territories. The land was never officially sovereign before it was taken. In other words, it didn't belong to us. No sovereign country annexed it before it became so-called occupied. You can only occupy a nation in violation of international law if that belonged to a nation prior. And Israel's claiming that it didn't belong to any nation. Anyway, my point is like this. My point is not to get entrenched in that question. My point is just to say that when you talk about occupied territories, when you talk about land, people living in other lands, Russia and Crimea, and there's endless examples of this, and it's in your textbook, endless examples. There's not a boo, there's not a this, there's not a that. Yeah, we talked about it for 5 minutes, Russia and Crimea. We talked about Russia for 5 minutes. We talk about, and meanwhile, again, not that Israel should say, look, we're not worse than the Russians. I mean, we don't want to put, the bar, that's not where the bar is. But the simple point is, when there's demonization, delegitimization, and a double standard that seems to be applied consistently to Israel, you just might have something else at play. And that's what we're suggesting. That might be where the line can be drawn. Could there be another way to draw the line? Might one disagree? Sure, this is one way of understanding it and applying that distinction. Now, what I want to do is move the conversation further to address something that's very serious and what I believe to be a very painful question. Because as troubling as anti-Semitism is in general, and as troubling as anti-Semitism in the guise of Israel criticism is when it is anti-Semitic, as troubling as that is, it's understandable, it's even manageable, it's even to be expected perhaps when it comes from the outside. When I say outside, let me be very clear. When it doesn't come from within our own ranks. So then it's like, yeah, all right, haters gonna hate. That's it. We know this. As Adina Malka said before, in every generation, the pharaohs get up and they try to start trouble with the Jewish people. It is what it is. What are you going to do? So it's troubling, it's disturbing, it's upsetting, but it's to be expected on some level, and we deal with it, and we're used to dealing with it. But there's a much more troubling trend. You might have noticed this. in the last war that went on not that long ago, the last Israel conflict. You might have noticed this on social media. You might have noticed this within your own neighborhood or community, or maybe even within your own family. The trend, there is a trend, and one might call it upsetting. And that is that it seems that our fellow Jews are turning against and vilifying Israel in the troubling ways that we described earlier. We're not talking about a Jew who doesn't like a certain politician in Israel or a certain policy or wants something changed. All legitimate, don't worry, not coming after any of that. That's all kosher. What I'm talking about is what I said before. When Israel is not just criticized, but demonized. When Israel is applied a double standard. When its entire legitimacy as a nation is called into question, Israel shouldn't exist. Israel should just fold and go away. That's troubling. It's even more troubling when it's spoken by, when it's coming from, posted by, articulated by, and flag waved by a fellow Jew, someone from inside our own camps. Again, that someone outside the tribe, so to speak, is going to hate. Okay, we've been used to that, but someone inside the tribe, it's hurtful. It's hurtful. You know, it's kind of like any criticism, right? A stranger criticizes, whatever, but a family member, oh, it hurts. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts even more. So here's the deal. Jews, including young American Jews, seem to be aligning more and more with organizations that do exactly the 3 Ds that we spoke about before: demonize, double standard, and delegitimize Israel. Again, this is not valid. We're not talking about valid criticism. Valid criticism is, by its very definition, valid. We're talking about straight up vilifying Israel, denying its right to exist, etc. And the question, the burning question that's begging to be answered is, how did we end up here? How did we end up in a situation where fellow Jews are on the attack against Israel in this way? And maybe more importantly, second question is, what do we do about it? How do we get here? And what can we do about it? In other words, what can we do? What can be done to address the fact that many of our own are turning against Israel in pretty intense and hateful ways, not constructively, but destructively? This is one of the, in my opinion, one of the most important questions of our times. It's, I would call it an existential question. It's about the very existence of Israel and the Jewish people. And it demands to be answered. And so I want to address it. I don't know if we're going to answer it, but I'm certainly going to address it tonight. Now, what I want to do is divide the two questions into two distinct conversations. Conversation number one is, what motivates the Jew to turn against Israel so viciously beyond reasonable criticism? That's question number one. Question number two is, what can be done to address and help forestall this from happening in the first place? So let's start with the first question. First question first. Where is this Jew on Israel hate coming from? Not the criticism. Criticism is fine, but where's the hate coming from? The vilification, the demonization, the double standarding, the delegitimizing Israel. Where's that from within our own ranks? Where's that coming from? So to gain some perspective, I'm going to share some stuff tonight that you might consider radical, but work with me. I think it's going to be either way an eye-opening conversation, whether you agree 100%, 90%, 50%, 20%. I think there's a lot to be learned from tonight's class, and I welcome you along this journey. And of course, comments and any critique, any feedback, any disagreement. Let's navigate this together. But for the perspective on the question of where's this coming from, this Jew on Israel hate, let's go back once again to our favorite story in this course, which is the story of the holiday of Purim, the story of Esther and Mordechai and Haman and Achashverosh, right? The good guys and the bad guys. And okay, so what's going on in this story? The story is well told. Haman has a decree. We've talked about it many times already. Haman wishes to destroy the Jewish people in one fell swoop. And eventually the decree gets annulled, and happily ever after we live, and we have a holiday called Purim, and we celebrate the salvation. Beautiful. You know, there's another holiday. That's one holiday, Purim. It's a rabbinic holiday. There's another holiday that's kind of similar. That's also a rabbinic holiday. Unmute yourself if you can read my mind. I'm going to beam my thoughts to you. Which holiday am I talking about? That's coming up very soon. That also
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah. Good. I didn't even have to finish the question. Hanukkah is what I was thinking. Yes, Passover also celebrates, but that's a biblical holiday. And the other rabbinic holiday, right, post-biblical holiday is Hanukkah. So we have Hanukkah and Purim. Now my question to you is this: keep your mics, keep yourself unmuted, because it's an open question. The question is, how would you characterize the distinction between Purim and Hanukkah? What are some of the differences in the story between Purim and Hanukkah? Go, jump in. Differences between Purim and Hanukkah.
Hanukkah, I think more the Jewish people were participating in, the battle and in cleaning up the temple and going to find pure oil. And it seems like in Purim, we're talking about Haman and Esther and Mordecai. There were just a few key players, not the whole group of.
Fair enough. What else? Give me more. Differences.
So Hanukkah was after the Judas Maccabee went in and basically put into correct order the way things worked in the temple, and he was fighting against basically other Jews who had been Hellenized, whereas Purim is Haman, and Haman is an outsider, and he's trying to get a group of outsiders to decide it's a good thing to maybe not have Jewish neighbors. But in the case of Hanukkah, it's Hellenized Jews that Judas Maccabee rose up against.
Good. Okay, good. What else? Good. Excellent so far. 2 for 2. Give me more. Give me a little bit more. What in the decree of Hanukkah versus Purim, what is the difference in the decrees? Drawer or Fran, I see you guys are.
I was going to say open miracles versus hidden miracles.
Good. We have open miracles, hidden miracles. So in the story of Hanukkah, it seems like an open miracle. Purim is a hidden miracle. Good. Excellent. Good. What else? Give me more about the decree. What's the difference in the decree?
Decrees.
What was Hanukkah? What was Purim all about? What was the agenda of Haman versus Antiochus, the Syrian Greek king? What was the agenda? What was the threat? What was the Jewish threat in each case? What did Haman want to do?
Destroy the Jews.
Haman wanted to annihilate. The Greeks wanted to assimilate.
Oh, good. Very good. Good. Right? So I think my mom is agreeing with Jerry. I think we have agreement here, right? So Haman wanted to kill the Jew, or in the language of Jerry, wanted to annihilate the Jewish people. Whereas in the story of Hanukkah, it wasn't about annihilation. It was about assimilation. So this is a famous distinction between Purim and Hanukkah. Purim was more of a physical, there was a physical threat. And Hanukkah was more of a spiritual threat, right? Which is why we celebrate it a little bit differently. On Purim, we have physical feasts and give physical gifts of food. It was all about the physical experience. On Hanukkah, we light menorahs that shed light. Okay, we also happen to eat latkes and jelly donuts, but that's because we can't resist, because we're Jewish.
And we give gelt.
And we give gelt. Okay, just don't tell anybody in this analogy, in this comparison, but whatever. But in general, Purim is more of the physical, right? The physical experience. Hanukkah is more the spiritual. And I like the language that Jerry used, which is annihilate versus assimilate. Annihilation versus assimilation. Let me break this down. What was Haman's agenda? We've said it before. He wanted to literally wipe out, destroy physically every single Jew from the face of the earth, men, women, children, young, old, middle, no matter who you were, if God forbid, he wanted to destroy every single Jew. That was his agenda. That was the Purim story. What was the Hanukkah story? The Hanukkah story is a bunch of Syrian Greeks. They were Syrians, but they were Hellenized, so they were Syrian Greeks. All right. What did they want? They wanted to kill the Jews? No, they had no problem with Jews. In fact, I'm going to take it a step further. They had no problem with Judaism. They had no problem with Judaism. What was the problem? Well, okay, hold on. Let me modify that. They had no problem with much of Judaism, but some parts they were a little bit iffy on, like the old-fashioned stuff or the very much faith-based stuff. You see, Greek philosophy is very much a rational philosophy. The Greeks love rationale. They love the body and the mind. They loved like the more sensible stuff. So the Greeks, they love philosophy. They were thinkers also. Judaism was cool. Well, Judaism, was okay, except for the uncool parts of Judaism, the stuff that didn't make a lot of sense to the Greeks. That's what they wanted to modify. So work with me on this. Work with me on this. How many Jews do you think will get behind Haman, the Haman who says, let's destroy and physically kill all the Jews? How many Jews do you think are going to be Haman supporters? How many? Zero, right? Which Jew is going to support Haman? Are you with me on this? I hope it's very clear. Again, Haman says, it doesn't matter how religious observant you are. If you're Jewish, you're dead. How many Jews are supporting that? Zero. I'm giving you a double zero just to emphasize the amount of zero we're talking about. No one is supporting Haman. No Jews are supporting Haman. But one second. What about Hanukkah? Hanukkah is when the Greeks, I'm going to paraphrase here, when the Greeks tell the Jews, you guys are almost okay, but if you want to be modern, if you want to be hip, if you want to be cool, if you want to be trendy, if you want to be on point, if you want to be on message, if you want to be modern, if you want to be like normal, if you want to be normalized, then you got to put away some of the stuff and embrace some other stuff and make it work. How many Jews do you think they got there? A lot. You know why? Because it's kind of a compelling message. We love you. We don't want to kill you. We love you. We want you on the same team. You just got to tweak some things. You got to tweak some things that are old-fashioned, that don't make sense. You got to make it a little bit more rational, more reasonable. There's a powerful text in your books from author Dara Horn. If you've been part of the Intown Jewish Academy book club, then you've read Dara Horn. She is a tremendous author. Which book did she read? Does anybody remember the title of the book that we read of hers? Who remembers? Charna, jump in.
Eternal Life.
Eternal Life was one of the best books I've read. Eternal Life is unbelievable. The premise of her book, Dara Horn, she's amazing. The premise of her book, she's a modern author. The premise of her book is, if you could live forever, would that be a blessing or a curse? That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to ruin anything in the book. That's the premise of the book. If you could live forever, good or not good? That's that. Dara Horn also writes about anti-Semitism. She writes about the Jewish experience. And if you're wondering, what does she write? I'm going to read it to you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm going to read this one. I got this one. Here we go. Dara Horn, text number 4. She calls it Hanukkah anti-Semitism and Purim anti-Semitism. Here we go. Buckle up. Hanukkah anti-Semitism doesn't demand dead or expel Jews, at least not at first. Instead, it demands the destruction of Jewish civilization. This process requires not dead Jews, but Jews who are willing to give up whatever specific aspect of Jewish civilization is deemed to be uncool. Of course, Judaism has always been uncool, which is why cool people find it so threatening, and why Jews who are willing to become cool are absolutely necessary to Hanukkah-style anti-Semitism's success. In the days of Antiochus, he was the king of the Syrian Greeks, the story of Hanukkah. In the days of Antiochus, this type of anti-Semitism needed those boys who voluntarily underwent painful genital surgery to prove that Jews weren't the problem, just the barbarity of Jewish law. Are you with me in what she's saying? Guys, do I need to translate this or you got this? Yeah, you got this? I'm just checking in. Not if you got this. What she's saying. Yeah, makes sense? She's saying, what happened in Hanukkah? They said, hey, circumcision is uncool. You guys got to be cool. It's barbaric. Don't do that. So Jews were like, we want to be cool. So we're going to reverse our bris, right? Reverse the circumcision. Hanukkah style anti-Semitism always promises Jews a kind of nobility, offering them the opportunity to cleanse themselves of whatever the people around them happen to find revolting. The Jewish traits designated as repulsive vary by country and time period, but they invariably contradict the specific values that the surrounding culture has embraced as, quote, universal. Thanks to Judaism's inherent uncoolness, there will never be a shortage of Jews willing to comply. That line is cut so deeply, in a good way. Judaism is inherently uncool. In other words, Judaism doesn't morph into the trend. That's not, Judaism is a tradition. It's not a trend. So inherently it will be uncool on some level in whatever era is around it. And thus, she says, there will never be a shortage of Jews willing to comply. Jews who wish to be cool and wish to be accepted and wish to fit in. Are you with me on this? So when the culture, the local culture, the leading culture of the time says, hey, Jew, what's up with that? You got to change that because it's not cool. And we've got universal values, and that's not a universal value. You got to change that. The cool-seeking Jew, the approval-seeking Jew will say, oh, yeah, that, I disagree with that also. That's crazy. And any Jew who believes in that is simply wrong and old-fashioned. And honestly, I'm going to criticize that Jew because they're wrong. And that part of Judaism is also wrong. Aren't I so cool? Don't I fit in? Aren't we buddy-buddy? Purim anti-Semitism has no takers because Purim anti-Semitism is where Haman says, let's kill all the Jews. No Jew gets behind that. That's a no-brainer. No Jew is going to say, yeah, kill me. That doesn't make any sense. But when you promise a Jew acceptance and the cool factor, and hey, you'll be accepted, and Jews jump at that. Jews jump at the bait. And so Dr. Maxey said accurately before that it was Judah the Maccabee who was fighting the battle as the leader of the Maccabees against whom? MOT, members of the tribe. Members of the tribe who joined the ranks of Hellenists. Oh, you think it was limited then? Are you kidding me? You know what happened in the times of communism? There was a Jewish group of communists. They were more communist than the communists. They're the ones that arrested the previous Rabbi in 1927. The ones who arrested the previous Rebbe in 1927 were the Esveksia, were the Jewish communists. And you know what? One of the Jewish communists, when he was leading the previous Rebbe to his arrest, he said, Rebbe, I'll hold your bag for you, just like my grandfather held your grandfather. His grandfather was a chassid. I'll hold your bag for you, just like my grandfather held your grandfather's bag. And the Rebbe refused. He said, your grandfather held my grandfather's bag where my grandfather wanted to go. Now you're taking me where you want to go. Stop playing chassid here. Stop playing. Anyway, I don't mean to disrupt the flow of the narrative with that story. But nonetheless, Purim, Haman says, let's kill the Jews. No takers, no Jewish takers. The anti-Semites come out. Sure, we talked about that last week. Anti-Semites come out, but the Jews don't come out. But you promise the Jew, you frame it as, no, Jews are fine. Judaism is fine, more or less, but some things are wrong. Now you got Jews. Now you got takers. That bait, the fish are biting. The fish are biting on that one. So this is what's going on in 2021. You want to know what's going on? Why the trend of Jewish anti-Israel vilification, not criticism, vilification. You know what's going on? Oh, the world says, you want to be normal. You want to be normalized. You want to fit in. You want to be cool. Okay, here's how it's going to work. All you need to do is this one little small thing. All you need to do is repeat after me. Israel is apartheid. Israel is apartheid. All you need to do is repeat after me. Israel is committing genocide. Israel's committing genocide. All you need to say is Israel has concentration camps. Israel has concentration camps. All you need to say is Israel is the worst violator of human rights ever in history. Israel's the worst. All you have to say is Israel shouldn't exist. Israel shouldn't exist. That's it. Now we're accepted. Yeah, good. We're good. All right. That's what's going on. You want to know what's going on? You want to know how our own are turning again, are repeating not legitimate criticisms, but over the top, violating the 3 Ds of valid Israeli criticism. You know why that's going on? One reason, perhaps. I can't say it's the whole reason, but one reason, perhaps. It's the same reason why there were Hellenists in the times of Hanukkah. It's the same reason. It's because the world has convinced us that these are normal. This is normalizing Jews and Judaism, and all you need to do is be on board, and now you're normal. Because otherwise, Jew, oof, you're not criticizing, you're not vilifying, not normalized. And all we want to do is fit in. It's normal. It's normal. It's perfectly human and normal to want to fit in. But Dara Horn's got it. She's got it. She's brilliant. She's got it. She's got it. Judaism is inherently uncool. Just give up. Just give up. Judaism is uncool. It's a tradition. It goes back 3,333 years. 33 and a half years. It's not trendy. It's not trendy. It's not trendy. You want to be trendy? Be trendy. It's not trendy. You want to criticize Israel? No problem. You don't like the prime minister? Have at it. You don't like the policy? Advocate to change the policy. You want to say that Israel shouldn't exist? You want to say that Israel's an apartheid state? Israel commits genocide? Israel violates international law? You want to say that? Research it. Before you puppet it, because everyone else is saying it, research it. Research it. Step back from the 3 Ds. I told you that I'm going to say that tonight's going to be a little bit rough. I told you that. I told you that. There's no way not to have an honest conversation when talking about this topic. Well, we should talk about the topic. What else are you going to say about the topic if we don't get real on this topic? This is a real topic, and it's a real painful topic. It's painful and it's personal. Without getting into details, there are people that I know, individuals that went to our Hebrew school, that went through our camps, and that are crossing lines, and it's painful. And you wonder, what happened? What's going on? When the world says something, it's hard to resist. The world says you want to be normal, you have to criticize like this. So it's hard to resist. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm acknowledging the challenge. All right, I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes. Let me check in. Does this make sense? Yes? Yes? Ish? Yes? Okay. I got 2 thumbs up. That's all I need. Okay. Oh, 3 thumbs up. Okay, good. All right. Questions, comments. Again, I just want to be very clear. I know I'm repeating myself, but I have to be clear. If legitimate criticism is legitimate, there's not a question. When it becomes demonizing, double standarding, I know I'm making it into an ing. When it becomes delegitimizing, that's when we need to ask the question, what's going on? That's it. And when it comes from Jewish ranks, one way of looking at it is saying the Jew is feeling the pressure of society to adopt that stance. That's very unfortunate. Okay. Questions, comments, rebuttals? If I'm dishing it out, I can definitely take it. Right? I'm ready to receive. I'm ready to receive. Okay. All right.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Dina Malko, jump in.
A Jew who converts like to Christianity, they see themselves as a fulfilled Jew.
I feel that's a little bit of a different conversation. We're focusing specifically on the idea of anti-Semitism vis-a-vis Israel. I don't think it's a contradiction. First of all, as I've said many times, in classes. Once a Jew, always a Jew. So that's it. It's like, yeah, listen. Trying to think of a good analogy.
Manus Freeman has one. He says a Jew that converts to Christianity is just a Jew practicing a new and different religion. They're still a Jew.
Still a Jew, exactly. Right, still a Jew. So to me, that's like, let's call it what it is, and the person can call it whatever they want, but still Jewish, not can't swap in can't turn in the Jew card. It's not possible. At least that's what we believe.
Well, I meant as far as assimilation.
Assimilation. Look,
if I don't practice Judaism,
right,
and I'm safe,
right.
Okay. And
so look, definitely a challenge. I don't think it's exclusive to that. I think the challenge is all around us. The challenge is we live in a country that is secular, that is Christian, that is all of the above. There's atheists. I mean, there's a lot of different stuff out there, and it's hard. It's hard to stay focused. And again, this is not a criticism. It's just saying, in response to the question, to my question, right? Where is this coming from? One answer, as Dara Horn, I believe, eloquently points out, is one perspective on this is it's Hanukkah anti-Semitism, or it's the challenge of Hanukkah. The challenge of Hanukkah is how to stand up and be uncool when the Greeks tell you, hey, just Hellenize and be normal. It's hard. So in some, it manifests itself as anti-Israel criticism, some it manifests as assimilation, some it manifests itself in other ways. But I don't know that there's I don't know that I have anything to say specifically about your question. It's more of a general challenge that we're addressing. Now, if the question is, so what to do about it, that's really the second part of the second question I asked earlier. I asked two questions. I said, number one, why does it seem like more and more Jews are getting caught up in this, strong, vilifying anti-Israel movement? Number one, like BDS and other things that are literally like delegitimizing Israel, like literally by its very definition, it's about undercutting on the academic level, just everything. So that's number one. And the second question is, what do we do about it? So that's where I'm up to now. So maybe that's where that would be helpful in this conversation. Is okay. So what do we do about it? So I would like to offer this. There's a lot of things that could be said about what to do about it. So this is where we are. We live in a culture that is now, some are vilifying Israel. Some of our own rank is now also vilifying Israel. So what do we do? So what do we do? Throw our hands up in the air and say, oh, that's it, we're doomed, or this is a problem? So unfortunately, there's no easy fix. I don't believe that there's an easy fix here. There's no button to press. There's no button to press that magically transforms a Jew who believes or who has demonized and delegitimized Israel, that suddenly now will come around. Somebody a Jew who calls for the dismantling of Israel as a Jewish state, someone who says Israel shouldn't exist. I don't think there's a button that you press that changes that. I don't think there's an easy fix, but there's a longer term strategy that I think we must consider if we wish for the truth and for a viable future for Israel to exist. And my suggestion, what I would like to offer today is simply one word: education, or more precisely, re-education. You see, for 70 years, and those of you here, I'm just taking a quick comment, parenthetical comment. Those of you that joined me last Wednesday night for our Torah studies class will be familiar with some of what I'm about to say, but I'm going to repeat it again. First of all, many of you would not attend the Wednesday night class and have no idea what I'm talking about. Number two, even if you were at the Wednesday night class, you'll see how this connects, I believe, very profoundly in today's discussion, and it's a very important piece of the puzzle right now. So that's the parentheses in the intro. Let's jump into what I'm trying to say. The long-term solution, or the long-term strategy for stemming this problem of this challenge of Jews joining these ranks of vilifying Israel, it's education, and it's really re-education. And it begins with a very clear understanding of what Israel is and what Israel isn't. And for 70 years, we've been repeating the same lines about Israel and about Israel's legitimacy. We've been saying that international consensus is behind Israel's founding as a Jewish state in 1948. We've shouted from the rooftops that Israel is so necessary for the safety and security of the Jewish people. Remember the Holocaust, no place to go. Israel is necessary for the safety and security of the Jewish people. And we proclaimed for all to hear that Israel is the historical home of the Jewish people. Just dig, and you'll find Jewish artifacts. And we've been saying this for 70 years, right? International consensus, safety and security, historical home of the Jewish people. These are the big three ideas. And not only that, these are the three ideas that are enshrined in Israel's own Declaration of Independence. Read the Declaration. I'm not going to read it now. Google it. Read Israel's Declaration of Independence, and you'll see these three themes: international consensus, the necessity for safety and security, and the idea that Israel is the long-standing home of the Jewish people. These are the big ideas, and they serve as the arguments for the legitimacy of Israel. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, especially for some of you, twice in 1 week. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, twice in 7 days. But the arguments, these three arguments, I know they're in the Declaration of Independence of Israel. They're not that compelling. They're just not that compelling. International consensus. Serious? You're kidding me? International consensus? That's the foundation of Israel. People will say, since when is colonialism okay? Just because people agree? Oh, because in 1948, a bunch of nations agreed that colonialism is okay. So we should in 2021, that's okay? You meshuggah? You crazy? Imperialism, colonialism, that's okay because someone said it's okay. It's not okay. Yeah. So much for international consensus. What happens when that consensus falls apart? Whoops. Yeah. And number two, safety and security. Come on. Safety and security. So you're going to post up in someone else's backyard for safety and security? That's kosher? Yeah. Steal someone's land, post up somewhere where someone's living, kick him out and say, I need to be safe and secure. Sorry. And what about the guy you just kicked out? Oh, I don't care about you. I need my safety and security. That's a compelling reason. That's a compelling reason. That's how you're going to get currency for Israel? Yeah. Safety and security. Thank you very much. And historical homeland of the Jewish people. Oh, Crimea River. Are you kidding me? Historical homeland. You know how many other people have been in Israel in the past? Yeah. And where did the Jews get it from? The Canaanites. Historical homeland. Go back to the Canaanites. Yeah, are you kidding me? All three fail. Critical analysis. By the way, I'm not saying actually that these are like totally wrong. Well, I'm just pointing out what the critic of Israel will say about all three of these. Consensus, international consensus, Baba Mises, colonialism. Safety and security, not in someone's backyard. And historical homeland, yeah, check the history books. Your Bible says you got it from somewhere else. So then what's going on? So then what's Israel doing there? See what I mean? These arguments are not that compelling. They have a lot of holes in them. And you know why? Because they're not the whole truth. Whoops. They're not the truth. It's like a book that I was reading recently by a good friend, Tom Keating, who happens to be here with us tonight. He wrote a book called Saturday School. I read it from cover to cover on a flight on Friday morning, this past Friday morning. And Tom writes about the law, essentially, in Decatur, Georgia, that public school takes place on Saturdays. The question's why? Everyone offers reasons. But as Tom does in his book, he pokes holes in all the reasons. And the conclusion, you have to read the book to find the conclusion. Tom, I don't know, should I give it away? Should I give it away? I don't know if I should give away the plot. Is that kosher?
You can give it away, although I like to have people read it to get their own thoughts.
All right, perfect. Tom's conclusion is, yeah, Saturday school, very convenient way. Policy, school, right? school policy way to just push away the Jews from settling in Decatur and ruining the Jew-free space. That's a very kitzer. Kitzer means a very short summary. Now read the book. It's like Hillel. Remember Hillel said, love your fellows yourself, the rest is complicated. Now go study and learn. Boom. Now go read the book. It's on Amazon. Check it out. Saturday school. Here's my point. The reason why these rationales have holes in them is because they're not the whole truth. Sure, there was international consensus. Sure, there was a Holocaust. Sure, there was a King David and a temple and archaeological finds in Israel. Sure. But you know what? That's not the whole truth. That's not why Israel is a Jewish land. Israel's a Jewish land because of one thing only.
Because God gave the land to us.
Read the Bible. The Bible says God gave it to Abraham. He gave it to Isaac and he gave it to Jacob. And he said it belongs to the Jewish people. That's it. That's it. And now you're thinking, oh my God, we're going to quote the Bible. Are we crazy? How's that going to be cool? Remember what Dara Horn said? Don't try to be cool. Just be authentic. Judaism doesn't need to be cool. It's not cool. You notice how few Jews there are? You think if this was really cool, it'd be a lot more Jews. Right? It's not about cool. What's popular isn't right. What's right isn't popular. It's not about popularity. It's not a contest. It's not a contest. How many followers you can have on Facebook or Twitter, or Instagram, or TikTok. It's not the question of popularity and coolness. The Bible says, the Bible that is allegedly believed in by billions with a B of people on planet Earth, Jews, Christians, Muslims. The Bible says black and white. God says to Abraham, I'm giving it to you and your descendants forever. Forever is a strong word, especially when God says it. God says to Isaac, the promise to Abraham is through you, not Ishmael. God says to Jacob, the promise is to you, not Esau. Jacob's sons are the 12 tribes, the founders of the Jewish people. This is what we're talking about here. It's black and white. That's why Israel's a Jewish land, not because of 1948, not because of the Holocaust, and not because of archaeological finds and digs. That's not why Israel is a Jewish land. All of those are what I would call the more politically correct way of saying it's a Jewish land. So we shine it up in a nice veneer. Again, I'm going to use that word second time in today's class. Shine it in a veneer and say, oh, don't you agree? Isn't it? And for some, it makes sense. In some eras, it makes sense. But in 2021, not so compelling. So here's my point. Let me make sure we maintain laser focus. For myself, I prepare these classes with laser focus to draw you through a narrative step by step. And I hope that I don't lose you with this focus. I asked the question, why is it that so many Jews of our own MOT, members of the tribe, are joining not valid criticism of Israel, which is valid, no problem. I also have my own beef with some things that are going. But why is it that Jews are joining movements that are literally, their statements, their canons are about tearing down Israel as a Jewish state? How is that possible? So I said, number one, because Jews like to fit in. It's not cool to be uncool. And how do we fix this? It begins by not hiding the truth. You want to hide the truth, and then you wonder why people don't know the truth and why you can't. Number one, the truth has to come out. We have to teach the truth. Whether or not someone's going to agree to it wholeheartedly, you got to tell the truth. You got to, especially to our kids. I'm going to hide the truth from our kids. And say to our kids that Israel's only legitimacy is because of 1948, because of safety and security. Then they're going to say, well, hold on one second. I don't agree with the decision in 1948. Imperialism, colonialism. I think they were wrong in 1948. Uh-oh.
Yeah, Israel wasn't, that area did not belong to Britain to give away. That's absolutely.
Or that, yeah, exactly. I mean, again, I don't know the specifics of that, right? But yeah, I don't agree with that. Whoops. Safety and security. I think Jews are safe. I think they're more dangerous, more a threat amongst millions of Arabs, hundreds of millions of Arabs. I don't think whoops, there goes that argument. And the land, I don't want to go through this again. Anyway, my point is very simple. You put up not truth, and it gets ripped down, and then what are you left with? put up the truth. Not everyone's gonna listen. The truth is, but at least put it out there for yourself, for your kids. It's not you. It's a we thing. It's not a you thing. It's a we thing. We have to teach our kids, have to give them a strong Jewish education, have to teach them Torah, have to teach them about God and about the Torah and about the Bible, about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and not just as Baba Mises and stories and fantasies and fairy tales about Noah's Ark and Adam and Eve and Abraham and Sarah and tents, but real, vibrant, living Jewish education, and that Israel is the promised land and Israel is a Jewish land. So I'll tell you a story. Decades ago, one of the presidents of Israel's name was a man named, his name was, hold on, why am I forgetting his first name? Zalman. Lubavitch name to boot, Chabad name. Zalman Shazar. And Zalman Shazar, Mr. Shazar, wrote a letter to the Rebbe criticizing the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He said, why is it that when the Rebbe speaks about Israel, he always refers to it as the land of Israel and not the state of Israel? Oof, shots fired. Shots fired. He was paying attention a little too much. The Rebbe never referred to it as the state of Israel, but as the land of Israel. Can you guess what the Rebbe answered? You know what the state of Israel means? 1948. You know what the land of Israel means? 3,000 years, 3,700 years. Which is stronger? Yeah? Go figure. You want to put all your eggs in that basket? Shazar could not fathom a time. I don't believe he could fathom a time when that argument of 1948 would be as hollow as it is today to a young American Jew. I'm using my words. I'm measuring them very carefully. The argument of the UN resolution in 1948 or the Balfour Declaration or the British mandate for the establishment of Palestine, all of that has never rung as hollow as it has to the 2021 American teenage Jew. Doesn't mean a thing. Doesn't mean a thing. Now you might say, well, the Bible also may not mean a thing. Okay, so we have to work on that. I told you it's not a button. It's a long-term strategy of education and re-education. It's a long-term strategy. But at least we have to present the truth. At least we have to present that truth. When we confidently believe, when we believe that Israel is the Jewish homeland promised by God and that we are not thieves, we are not colonialists, and when we teach this to our children, we have a much better shot at turning the tide of perspective about Israel. Not that suddenly Israel becomes perfect and immune to criticism. No, Israel can do wrong and Israel can be criticized. But the legitimacy, and we're very clear, the legitimacy of Israel as a Jewish land, not simply a Jewish state, that is addressed when we go to the core of the background. And this will, please God, help curtail anti-Israel vilification, at least from within our own ranks, or at least reduce that number. One final point. One final point. Just like was the case with anti-Semitism last week, we spoke about there's a deeper soul of anti-Semitism, the ditch and the mound, and we spoke about that at length. There's also a deeper sentiment behind anti-Israel vilification. I'm going to say it to you quick, 45 seconds. The soul of anti-Israel vilification is the notion that Judaism is a spiritual path that doesn't require a land. Why do you need a land? Just be spiritual, have Torah, will travel. You don't need a land. And the response to that, again, on a deeper soul level is Judaism is not a religion. Judaism is not a path of nirvana and spiritual connection to God. It is that, but that's not all that it is. Judaism is primarily a guide for how to live our lives in a healthy and productive manner, which means that Judaism is about guiding life on earth. And that's why Israel is so important. That's why a piece of earth, a piece of land is so important. Otherwise, it would be a claim, and it might even be a Jewish claim to say, that why did Jews need a physical piece of the earth? You have Torah, that's all you need. Torah requires a land. Torah requires a physical space. Now you could say, well, you could do it anywhere, and that's true. But the fact that Jews and Judaism have Israel, the fact that God gave it to Israel, is an indication that indeed the spirituality of Judaism is meant to permeate the very physical earth. That's the deeper significance of when we say the Holy Land. It's making the land holy. And my friends, this takes us to the end of the lesson. So today we learned a lot about Israel, and we learned a lot about how anti-Semitism can manifest itself vis-a-vis the Jewish homeland. We saw that Jewish hate can take the form of anti-Israel hate and can be considered the third wave of anti-Semitism. We also saw that not all criticism of Israel is inherently evil. We learned about the 3 Ds that can help us distinguish between what's valid criticism and what's hateful vilification. We discovered that anti-Israel hate in Jewish circles may be motivated by the desire to fit in and be relevant. We affirmed that our connection to Israel is not due to incidental factors on the ground, but rather due to God's promise that it is our eternal homeland. We discussed how sharing and teaching and reteaching this idea can change the entire nature of the narrative. And finally, we emphasized that Israel represents Judaism's call to infuse the world, the physical world, with godly light and divine values. My friends, I want to conclude with this. Let us always remember who we are and what we're about. And when we walk with confidence, the world will respect us. May peace always prevail. May God continue to watch over the land of Israel, as he promises in the book of Deuteronomy, that the eyes of God are always upon the land of Israel from beginning of the year to the end of the year. May there only be peace and happiness. And let us say, Amen. Thank you for joining me tonight. A very quick announcement about next week's class. Thank you. Very quick announcement about next week's class. Next week is our 4th and final session. This is a 4-week course. Many of our courses are 6 weeks. This one is 4. It's called Change of Heart. We've saved, in my opinion, the best for last. What should we do on a practical level when we encounter anti-Semitism? How ought we respond to the affront, to the chutzpah? Should we protest? Should we cancel them? Should we perhaps begin a dialogue with the enemy, which seems maybe wrong? Join me next week for our grand finale as we look at some incredible do's and don'ts, practical and incredible do's and don'ts for dealing with anti-Semitism on the ground. You don't want to miss this, and I believe you will be shocked by some of the messaging of next week's class, shocked in a good way. Join me next week, same bad time, same bad channel. I thank you. I thank you dearly for joining me tonight and for being part of the conversation. And I welcome questions and comments now. A very quick, before we open the mics, a very quick, and you can open your own mic, but very quick points of announcement. Number 1, we are beginning our new Rosh Chodesh Society course next Monday night called Well Connected. This is a course for women, by women, that speaks about how to ground Jewish spirituality in practical ritual. You don't want to miss this. Gorgeous conversations. It's stunning in its import and its impact. Monday nights, 7 months, beginning this Monday night, November 15th, 8 p.m. That's number 1. Number 2, we're starting up our Jewish book club once again. Check out the website, intownjewishacademy.org/book. to join the book club and get information about the titles and the dates. Next, we have a Hanukkah jewelry workshop set for Saturday night, November 20th. Join us in person or online for this incredible opportunity. We also have Mitzvah Day, Meals of Love. Join us to cook meals for those that do not have homes. Individuals in Rebecca's tent, which is a local women's shelter, run in conjunction with Congregation Shereth Israel. We are going to be cooking warm and loving meals for those individuals that need it so dearly and desperately. Join me to help cook and prepare those meals. And that date on that is November 21st. Stay tuned for an announcement about some more stuff that's upcoming. And also join us for the Kabbalah of the Matrix, which is coming up in December. We have so much more. We just confirmed Rabbi Label Wolf, the Australian mystic, for a meditation session. We have so much coming up. It's going to just knock your socks off. Join us, take a look. And of course, if you can, help sponsor the events and the programs. That always goes a long way in helping bring it to our community. Okay, open mic, questions, comments, please jump in.
Question.
Yes.
Isn't it possible that people are afraid to cite God because they're actually afraid of being physically attacked?
Could be, sure. I would say, yeah, I would say pick your spots, right? You definitely want to make sure that you got the right audience for that. And I don't know that, your mileage may vary with that. This is more of an internal conversation. This is more of a question about Jewish education. How the question on the table is our kids.
Yeah.
And I'm offering the answer is let's teach our kids authentically. That means we have to believe in it ourselves. That means we have to present it authentically. That requires a little more work. The other stuff is a little easier. So this requires more work. What happens when the violent anti-Semite hears us quoting God, what they're going to do? That's a good point, and that's a good question. And that has to be obviously taken into consideration and looked at. But this is about our education of our own. This is about our kids. This is about our kids. And it's not.
No, I just wanted to bring up the point that it might not always be because someone's trying to fit in.
Right. Oh, that point of it.
Yeah,
True.
because it might be that someone is actually afraid of being attacked and they don't want to bring up the fact, oh yeah, I'm different. I'm a Jew and God gave me.
Right. Yeah. But that would be a temporary circumstance, but not a long-term position.
unless the guy has a gun.
But again, that's how long is that going to? I mean, you could have some. Yeah.
Well, it could last for the rest of the person's life, unfortunately.
Okay. I mean,
I'm just trying to bring up a point.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah. Okay.
No, that might be that motivation that somebody's actually physically afraid.
Right. Yeah.
Not just wanting to fit in. That's the only thing I wanted to say.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
I don't want to give it any more of a bad, what do you call it? An ayin hara. I don't know how to translate that.
Of course. All right, Kenny, jump. Oh, Kenny, did you want to say something? I saw you unmute before. I think I caught you mid-bite. No worries if not.
Just toda rabba, Rabbi.
My pleasure. Kenny, I'm wishing you good health. That's the main thing. The discussions are good also, but the main thing is good health. And the merit of the Torah learning that we did tonight, you should have blessings, all the blessings that you need for good health, complete recovery, and back to 110%. Not 100%, 110%. That's the blessing. Better than ever. Good. Questions, comments? Jump in.
Well, it just reminds me of the Jews in Germany who became, Reformed Jews and very secular, and they thought, well, they served Germany in the First World War, and they thought all this was going to save them.
Right.
And that's right. Yeah,
it's a theme we spoke about last time. It's that, it's a similar dynamic where, I mentioned this before. I think I mentioned this very recently, where there were Jews in Germany who wished to take out the blessing in the Amidah for the redemption, for a return of the temple for Mashiach. And they said, because Germany is so good. I mean, little did they know, a few decades later, the Holocaust. So it just reminds us to, I don't know what it reminds us, the dangers of trying to fit in, the futility of trying to fit in, all of the above.
It's the futility.
Yeah. Tom.
Given the last reference, I think it's appropriate to mention that tonight is the anniversary of Kristallnacht.
Thank you for mentioning that. I did not know that. Wow. That's powerful. It's powerful. Yeah.
Rabbi, whatever happened to can't think of, the Orthodox singer that was so popular, the young guy.
Matisyahu. Matisyahu.
Oh, Matisyo?
Metis, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's still doing it.
yeah, I mean, he was Orthodox in his garb, and
Oh, yeah. He was Hasidic. What do you mean? He was Chabad.
I
Yeah,
mean, he
started
was
Chabad.
right. Yeah, he was right there. He was right out there with it.
Yeah. Listen, I don't know him personally. He's on his journey. I do know that he's very close with my good friend, Rabbi Lipsker over at Chabad at Emory University. And he just did a concert a few weeks ago, and Rabbi Lipsker went backstage and fabrained with him. So I know that he's still connected in his own way, and he's like everyone else. He's on a journey, and so we can't always judge by let's put it this way: we can't always judge by external appearances what's going on, and things can fluctuate, and things can change. But Matisyo is still calling Chabad rabbis and having good connections before and after concerts. That's still happening as of 2-3 weeks ago. Matisyo. All right, good. All right, great seeing everybody tonight. It's great to explore this topic together. I hope it resonated on some level. I hope at least some of the points resonated. And please God, we should only have blessings, health, and peace, and love, and happiness, and only good things. All right. And happy birthday, Mom. That's also right. Don't forget, happy birthday, Mom. It's great to see you. It's great to learn together. It's great to speak multiple times in one day. So happy birthday. May all your heart's desires be fulfilled for the good. And you should continue to have nachas from us and from the whole mishpacha.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Elaine.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. All right. We'll see you guys. Have a good night. Laila Tov. Take care, everybody.